We're so blessed, we're so privileged to have this man in our midst this morning. For over 30 years, Ron Luce has helped lead our youngest generation on the journey to the cross. In addition to helping prepare the next generation of spiritual leaders, Ron also works to help other global leaders engage the 1.8 billion youth of the world. He has written 30 books. He has been hosting weekly TV program. He has a YouTube channel and has spent 22,000 hours face-to-face with more than 3 million youth at conferences. He has dedicated his life to helping parents and leaders in the church reach the youngest hearts in our communities. Let's give it up for Ron Luce. Welcome to Manila.
It's great to be back in the Philippines. Very excited about Jesus Global Youth Day. I want to say thank you to Bishop Noel and all the bishops, Ellie and Ancho and all the different leaders. You know, the PCEC has been working for more than a year on planning, all the different committees you heard about a moment ago. But what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of backdrop. Where did this all come from? So you understand this is not just another event. I know Philippines is not strangers to events. You guys have had lots of big events here. And it was really birthed a number of years ago as I was traveling through. We had sent a mission team here and I got to meet Bishop F, who was before he was leading the WEA. We were talking about the youth of your country, here in the Philippines, and what's going on. And Bishop F, I'm not trying to blame him for something, but he looked at me in the middle of our conversation and he said, Ron, you know how the Catholics do a World Youth Day every few years, and the Pope comes, we had one here, and you know, hundreds of thousands come, it's a pilgrimage. I said, yeah, of course. He goes, why have the Protestants never done any global event for youth? We need to do one, and you need to lead it. So everything I'm about to tell you is his fault. And that was probably 5 years ago, and Bishop F and I have been talking nonstop ever since. The seed began to grow, began to share with leaders around the world. I want you to understand the context of what's happening with youth all over the world and the church all over the world, so you can see the moment that we're all, the global church, is in the middle of right now. One of the things, the last year and a half I've been traveling, meeting with bishops and leaders, church leaders all over the world, probably leaders from 100 different nations I've met with, just like the last few days I was telling you about. One of the things we find around the world is that leaders are frustrated. There's not many youth in their church. They're not like Pastor Ellie's church, or Bishop Ellie's church, you know, they're 70%. They have very few, and they don't know what to do about it. They're frustrated, and they know they ought to be doing something, but they don't know what to do. And so we're praying that Jesus Global Youth Day becomes a catalytic moment for them where hope is born, and they can see it is possible for the church to reach the next generation. Let me tell you how. First of all, I have a gift for you all before we get into this. You can take a picture of this and just email this address, ronbooklet@gmail. It's a series of video clips, how to double and disciple your youth group in the next year. And it's a free discipleship book as well for your youth. It's a PDF. You just get an automatic kickback. It'll send you the link, and just to bless you. Anybody like free things here? No? So good. There's something free for you, just to bless you. So let's talk about a construct, a way to think about exponential youth ministry. Exponential means it keeps, like dominoes, keep going and going and going and going. We don't need just another event. We don't need just a little Christian rah-rah. We need something that starts and keeps going and going and going until Jesus comes back. Can I have an amen? Amen. So, push back from all the urgency that you have, everything's screaming at you, and let's get a glimpse of what's happening around the world right now. There's a phenomenon several that some are data, some are because of relationships. I mentioned leaders are frustrated, their churches are not growing. discipleship making seems to be a urban legend. Yeah, I heard someone once made a disciple. We're not sure how to do it, but we heard that if they take a class, they'll be a good one. The young generation we know are captivated all around the world by this. I'm sad and embarrassed and ashamed to tell you what I'm about to say, is that after 30 years of ministry in North America to youth, stadiums filled, arenas filled, I started getting letters from bishops around the world, leaders, pastors around the world saying, Ron, we see your events on TV, all these young people coming forward by the thousands. What about our young people in our nation? They're listening to your music from America. They're watching your movies from Hollywood. Our young people are more like your culture than our culture. We don't know how to reach them anymore. Can you come and help us? And it's like a knife in my heart. America used to be known for sending the gospel around the world. Now, it appears we're sending poison, making it harder. So my first request is to ask forgiveness of you if our culture has impacted your youth here in Manila and made it harder for them to be reached. We find all around the world that with phones in their hand, I was in Laos the other day, very poor country, but all the kids have phones. And they're all looking at it. They don't have food, but they have phones. Right? It's like Wi-Fi is like oxygen for them. Oh no Wi-Fi, I'm going to die. And so we find leaders know that their youth are captivated and they don't know what to do about it. So, and of course, the worst part is that it's not just what they see, the gaming and social media and videos and all that, but it's the values that they receive as a result, right? They learn to love things that we ought to hate. How many have ever been in a movie or seen a TV program where the guy robs the bank and you find yourself cheering for him to get away from the police? He just stole your money and you're hoping he gets away. So, but that's just how the world works in a very subtle way to try to shape our values in a different way. So, some of the global trends, what we call the grain of the church. Data shows that in America, we'll start there, because that's where I'm from, the average age of a megachurch attendee is 40 years old. Average age of a small church attendee is 53 years old. In England, the average age of an attendee of church is 61 years old. Anyone see a trend here? But it's not just in the West. Of course, we know Europe. It's horrible. It's really post-Christian. But it's all over the world to some degree or another. Let me just give you some of this data. Startling. I know there's a lot of small print here. I'm not going to go through a lot of data, but there's a few pieces that are very important. Pew Research, it's a secular company that does a lot of religious research around the world. They're saying that by 2050, it'll be the first time in history that Islam dominates the world religions. There'll be more Muslims than all Catholics and Protestant and Orthodox all combined. So everybody take a deep breath. Just think about what that means. What does the world look like dominated by Islam? I don't know, maybe like Syria? A couple of other details about this. Well, the Christianity, the rate of growth is 35%, and it's the same as the world birth rate is 35%. So you might think, oh, that's good, at least we're keeping up with birth rate. However, some parts of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa, there's some revival going on. So it skews the data. In other words, in most places where there's already Christians or Christianized, it's shrinking. The church is not even replacing itself. They're not reaching the next generation. Probably the most alarming piece of data that I'll show you all day is right here. Median age of Christians around the world is 30. Median age of Muslims is 23. Why is that important? Median means half of all the Christians in the world are over 30, half are younger than 30. Half of all the Muslims in the world are over 23, half are under 23. What does that mean for birth rate, childbearing years, all of that? It means by 2050, the trend is irreversible unless something dramatic happens. It's going to happen. They will dominate the world, and we'll be wondering, what happened? What happened? What happened? And it's not that they're converting people, of course. They're just having lots of babies. 7, 8, 9 children. Like in Kenya, they'll send their young men into Southern African countries and say, marry 3 or 4 Christian wives and have as many children as you can. They're breeding Christians out literally. South Korea, I just came from there yesterday. You know they've closed 10,000 churches in the last 10 years. Why? Well, they're full of old people. The old people are dying. There's no young people. There's nothing left to do. They closed the door. Here's some of the data I just mentioned. You can see the Christian growth, Muslim growth. This is the year 2050 where they eclipse us. So you can see the Christianity growth here is 35%. It's the same as the global population. But you see Muslim growth is 73%. More than twice as fast as Christian rate of growth. I'm just trying to put everything in context for you here. Just a little bit more about Korea. You know the revival that happened, most of us know about, right? Maybe you younger people don't. But in the 70s and 80s, one of the most profound things in the history of Christianity. In a Buddhist nation, they went from 5% to 33% Christian in one generation. Who's ever heard of that? That's amazing, right? Yeah. People in Thailand and Laos, they wish they could have that there. However, today, a new study just came out, showed, watch this, 1.7% of the next generation. They went from 33% to 1.7 in one generation. It's actually worse than before the revival. They've got K-pop. How many of you guys have K-pop bands that come through here? Well, they're immersed in it. They're making this stuff. So, this is probably the poster child of what we don't want to have happen all around the world. You know how many times we've heard we're only one generation away from extinction as Christians? It's actually happened there. Some leaders, like in Indonesia and others, they know what's happened in South Korea, and they don't want it to happen in their nation. There's some revival going on in Africa. I met with the leaders of the revival there. They're in the middle of it right now, and I said, how are you doing with the next generation? And then I told them about South Korea, and they said, we better make sure this doesn't happen here. Reminds me of this verse. Maybe you remember this. Judges says that, and then the next generation rose up who did not know the Lord or the miracles of their fathers. Anybody remember this? You know when this was written? Right after Joshua and Caleb died. So imagine this. Joshua and Caleb led them into the land, the promised land. You know, they killed all the giants, they won all the wars, they captured all the land, they divided it among all the Israelites, and then they died, and nobody even remembered the miracles. In fact, some places, like when they walked through the Jordan, God said, make a big memorial there, so every time they walk by this pile of rocks, they'll remember the miracle. Just a generation later, they died, and they walked by and saw a pile of rocks. This verse was written about 67 years after Moses went through the Red Sea with the children of Israel. How could it happen so quickly? Remember the frogs and the hail and all of that? They forgot all about it. It was their parents or grandparents who went through that. It's sort of a dropping of the baton, as it were, right? If the baton is faith, it didn't get passed to the next generation. So this is what we're here to talk about. It's not an event. It's about passing the baton to the next generation. Here in Manila, here in the Philippines, and all around the world. How is the church doing? Now, the relay races in the Olympics are one of the most exciting events, right? Because everybody's looking to see if this is going to happen. You know, those guys practice it over and over, thousands of times. They do it with their eyes laser behind their back. They just do it and do it because they know it doesn't matter how fast you run. If you don't pass the baton, you lose. And just the chance that this might happen seems to happen every time, and a lot of times it's with people from my country. And it's a heartbreaking moment. You look at the expression on their face. They know all the rehearsal is for nothing. If they drop the baton, they lose a race. They lose maybe a little, dignity and shame. If we drop the baton, we lose a whole generation. Right. Here in the Philippines and around the world. So, let me give you a bright spot. Because in a few places around the world, there's some churches and church movements have learned how to do it. Let me tell you about Ghana. Bishop Opoku, who leads the Pentecostal Church of Ghana. I'm looking for best practices around the world. Most of the people that are doing well they're not well known. People around the world don't know them. So I've been digging them up. So Bishop Opoku leads this group. He began leading it 10 years ago, becomes the general secretary. And he realizes they're not reaching their youth. They're not even hardly showing up at church. They're like running them off. Their music, their style, whatever it is at the church, they're not reaching their youth. So he has some really honest conversations with his bishops and regional directors and pastors, begins to teach them how to love the young people. What are some things in the culture of our church that aren't scriptural mandates, but they're things that we've adopted that are pushing kids away? Now, how many of you know these are hard conversations to have? He got old people mad at him. Anyways, fast forward 10 years later. Today, 72% of all their attendees are under 30 years old. Of the whole denomination. It gets better than that though. When he started 10 years ago, there were 1 million people in their whole denomination. Today, there's 2 million people in their whole denomination. 750,000 of that new million are youth. Not only that, he told me it's like icing on the cake. He said, we weren't even trying to raise money. We didn't take any special offerings. But as everything began to grow, reaching youth and the attendees and everything began to grow, money began to come in. We had so much money, we didn't take one extra offering. We bought a piece of land, built a whole campus, 3,000 people. They got a seminary they built. They got a conference center worth about $30 million US dollars. I think that's just a blessing from God. He's finally happy somebody's focusing on the next generation. And so, I say this, if you're a leader of a movement, if you're a leader of a denomination, if it's difficult to turn a church to focus on the next generation, imagine how much more difficult it is to lead a whole movement to do that. And here Bishop Opoku is doing this. So we're looking for best practices because part of Jesus Global Youth Day is we're going to bring in these best practices from all over the world and showcase them to the world and to all the pastors, the senior pastors to come. We're inviting the world to come, the youth to come, of course. We know the youth leaders will come as well, but we're inviting their senior pastors to come because the very first day, the 8th of August, we're going to have a global pastors conference on the next generation. And all we'll do is have stories and people like this sharing best practices from all over the world. Now, it doesn't mean you go and do exactly what they did, but you learn principles from them and go, okay, what does it mean for my ministry, for my culture, for my youth? So let's talk about what happens on the relay race real quick. The exchange zone is the part of the relay race where the baton is exchanged, right? You can't pass it before, you can't pass it after. You got to do it right there. So this exchange zone for the gospel, when does that happen? When is the gospel best, most received, most likely received? Well, all the data shows us all around the world, it's between 13 and 19 years old. This is the exchange zone. I want to just give you these real quick. Number one is this. Here's some of the different ones I found, but these are the ABC. A is this, ownership. The pastor, the bishop, the senior leader needs to own the responsibility for reaching the next generation. You can't subcontract it out to your youth leader. Okay? It's great to have youth leaders. And a lot of pastors are frustrated because they go like, but how can I do this? I'm not cool. I don't have tattoos. I don't have ear piercings. What can I do? I can't relate. And I just want you to look at this picture right here, this guy. Does this guy look cool to you? Not cool. Old white guy. Now this guy right here runs a company called Viacom. Viacom owns MTV all around the world. MTV is reaching more young people than we are in the churches, I guarantee you that. So watch this. He's not a cool guy, he's a smart guy. He's a strategic guy. He owns it. I'm going to get those 1.8 billion. I'm going to get my message, his TV program in front of all those eyeballs. He hires the cool people to be on TV. He's the strategist. Pastors, bishops, leaders, I would say this is your role. The young generation needs your strategy. They need your theology. They need your wisdom, your years of experience. So you're the architects of reaching and discipling the next generation. You don't have to do all the work. But don't die with all that experience and training on the inside of you. How can you leverage that? So this guy is making it really hard. If you're in that zone, it's really hard. You're going to see his TV program somewhere. As I travel, it's one of the first things I look for is MTV here. I hate it when they made it there before the gospel did. Or the gospel made it there, but they made more momentum than the gospel has. So, ownership in the churches and ministries that are most successful, the leader owns it. Bishop Opoku says, when a young person comes up to me that I've never met, he's 17, 18, 20 years old, and he says, thank you for loving us. Thank you for loving me. I said, I've never met them before. But they can tell my heart and what we've started here, that I have a heart for them.
Amazing.
So, ownership. So, again, the ownership, you're owning the exchange zone. So, for example, here in Manila, I know there's all kinds of kids on city and all this. Do you know, for example, if you're a pastor in one of those parts of Metro Manila, do you know how many youth are even in that? How many 13-year-olds, 14, how many schools are there? Like, you own it, you figure it out. Okay, how do we get to them? How do we get in front of them? How do we make sure the gospel? Youth ministry is not taking care of, this is what the problem we've had in America. We think youth ministry is taking care of the youth who belong to the parents who go to my church. That's not youth ministry. Youth ministry is, how do we get the baton to the next generation? Whether they're in our church or not. Most of them are not in your church, right? So the senior pastor owns it, or you're from outside the city somewhere, in a village or another town or another city. So you own it, you figure it out. You go, okay, we're gonna strategize how we get the gospel to them. So you're owning it. So we talked about this already. Approximately 25 million here in the Philippines that are. What if? Let me just challenge some paradigms, because this is what I've seen in some of these most successful around the world. What if you had just as many youth in your church as adults? When you heard Bishop Billy say, we have 70% are youth, probably freaked some of you out. Like, what? How did you 70%? Really? Well, I know you have a lot of youth. You're a highly young country. You know, I talked to a pastor in India who goes, we're so excited with 35% of our attendees are youth. And I did a little research and found that 60% of their country is youth. So what happens sometimes, come on, we're smart, we're Christians, we got the Holy Spirit, right? We got to look at all the data. He's celebrating that they got 35%, but he's actually celebrating while they're getting further behind. You following me? But let's hold it all in context. It's great for Bishop Elliott to celebrate because he's beating the demographics. Yeah. So we need a lot more churches like that. What if, another paradigm, some of the most successful ones around the world, churches that are reaching youth are targeting the 13-year-olds. You know, 13 to 20 is the window, but the younger you get, the more likely they are. We spend so much of our time, and I also say this across the board, all of our evangelism efforts, we spend time trying to catch people who don't want to get caught. 13-year-olds want to get caught. It's that age like, who's going to like me? Who are my friends? What kind of music? Am I into sports? So they're trying to figure out. They're waiting for someone to capture them. They want to get caught. So the churches that focus on the 13-year-olds, bring them to Christ, get them into a discipleship program, they turn 14, go after the 13-year-olds again, and the next year go after the 13-year-olds again. You start seeing a slow revolution begin to brew. Okay, so A, pastor owns it. B is the exchange zone. Make sure the gospel gets passed. Okay, that the gospel is passed. You know, there's a lot being said right now in the body of Christ about passing the baton. And a lot of times it's the 60-year-old passing it to the 40-year-old in leadership. And that's important. But do you know it's possible to pass the baton of leadership, but not pass the baton of the gospel to the next generation? We got to do both. We got to have both batons passed, right? So if you're a 60-year-old or if you're a 40-year-old, if you've got the baton of leadership, we got to focus, we got to skew young, we got to go after the 13-year-olds. Remember the 23-year-old, that's the median age of Muslims? If we're going to try to change the trajectory, and we've got to go after the younger ones that are most likely to come. It's the message of the gospel. C is this, so it's A, B, and C. So A is ownership, B is pass the baton in an exchange. C is stickiness. That is, you know when you get sugar or something on it, you know, everything you touch gets sticky. Stickiness is a term they use in marketing. When you see like an advertising, like for a movie, and you can't forget it, they call it really sticky. Well, you know, we have the kind of gospel too often. We beg people to get saved, we beg them to come to church, we beg them to read their Bible, we beg them to live holy, we beg them to give tithe, beg, yet it's not sticky. It's like begging. Stickiness is like, you get them committed to Christ and then involved, and this is how the best ones around the world, best practice, a systemic method of growth. Where like once they're in, they're They're on a growth track. They're not like, oh, please come back to church. I hope they come back. No, we got them involved. Now, I know there's a lot of great things going on here in the Philippines. There's G12, and there's Victory, and there's other great systemic, but the best churches around the world are doing things like that, where they are, whatever the system might be, they've got a system for growth that's fully encompassing, and they got a plan for them. Watch this. I've seen these guys, they've got a plan when they're 13 and 14 and 15, all the way through 25, where they want them to be in their faith, how much they want them to grow, how much influence they want them to have. They start training them for leadership at 14 and 15 years old. So the reason I'm telling you this, it's not an urban legend. Oh, I heard one time there used to be really good people at Reaching Youth. There are people right now doing it. We need to learn from them so we can see revolution. So growing your church young, easy as ABC, and I had to add a D. There's one last thing here that I just encourage you to think about. Pastors, bishops, when you think about success, how do you measure it? Well, instantly, every Sunday a pastor wants to know how many people were there and what's the offering. There may be other measures of success, I'm sure there are, on your dashboard. Could I just encourage us all to think about this? A new gauge. What's the average age of your church attendees? And how does it compare to last year and the year before? Because this is what's happening in many parts of the world. The grain of the church, it's getting older just a little bit. Just a little bit. Getting older. Just the clock is ticking just a little bit. Before you know it, well, we're closing 10,000 churches in South Korea. Wow. In America, we're famous for this. I'll just be honest with you. America's the land of Hollywood. Hollywood's famous for making things look really good that aren't. So you get people that are alcoholics getting divorced, and they're in a romantic comedy movie. How beautiful life is. They're faking it. Well, we've Hollywoodized the church to some degree. Oh, look at this conference. Oh, this big year. Oh, that's great. Oh, that. Getting older. Getting older. The clock is ticking. Most are not even measuring this. What's the average age of your church attendees? You know that axiom, whatever gets measured gets done? If you knew you were getting older, compared to the median age of Christians, 30. Is your church older than that? If you know you're getting younger each year, at least you're on a good trend. You don't have to be immediately young, but are you growing yourself young? Is the question. So, the whole idea of this Jesus Global Youth Day is to help the global church wake up to the things I just mentioned to you. And the fact that we can do something about it. It's to create a global focus. You know, when you do a big event, you have the chance to get people's attention. While we have that attention, we want to equip and inspire pastors, bishops, youth leaders all around the world. National focus for here in the Philippines and a global focus. What do I mean by this? So we know the days 8th, 9th, and 10th. The 8th will start with the Congress for the senior pastors. Then the festival will start in the afternoon and evening. The second day, the 9th, will be a big Congress for youth leaders from all over the world. And then the festival. And then Saturday will be the big finale. So when we were planning this initially, meeting with the PCEC, Bishop F, we were thinking, we'll do the big event like downtown, Griswold Park, all of that. And then, it's actually the same weekend that the United Nations International Youth Day is, on the 11th. So what we want to do is make some noise with Christianity. Bishop F just met with the General Secretary of the United Nations, told him all about Global Youth Day. He was very excited that it's at the same weekend as their big event. And but then we realized, sometimes in August the weather's not too good around here. Right? So at first we were like, we'll just have faith. Well, then we began to wrestle and talk with the leaders of the PCEC. Thought maybe there's a different paradigm. Maybe there's a different opportunity. Take what might seem like a negative and turn it to a positive. So what we decided, yes, we got the Mall of Asia Arena. We've got some other backup arenas for overflow. But what we really want to do is impact as many youth as possible. If you had 100,000 or 500,000 or 1 million youth come from all over the Philippines into Manila, how easy is it for them to get from one place to another? You know what the traffic's like without them, right? So we're not, in addition to the weather, we thought, what about, how are we going to move people? How are they going to get back and forth? Are we just creating a huge problem? So we changed paradigm. We thought, what if we could have 1,000 or 5,000, maybe 10,000 churches stream what happens in Malabays Arena into their churches all over the Philippines. Every one of those 10,000 churches filled with young people, both saved and unsaved young people. Has anything ever happened like that? Imagine 1 million youth and maybe a quarter of them get saved. And then begin a discipleship process. So some people will be able to be in the Malabays Arena, but it's really not about being in the arena. It's about being a part of this national impact. Now, imagine this. Yeah, though, there are going to be delegates coming from all over the world. We have steering committees, national coordinators in about 45 countries right now already planning. Right? Already starting to figure out how many they want to send. And in fact, Indonesia said they want to send 1,000 pastors, they want to send 10,000 youth, and they want to have enough places in their country because we're going to broadcast the last day on Saturday, just the last day around the world. And so they want to have enough places in their country for 200,000 youth at locations all over their country. You're the only place. Philippines gets all 3 days in all the churches, right? Because this is about the Philippines. We want to see revolution start here. So imagine this. Imagine this. Pastors are beginning to be alerted that there's an issue. The church is growing old. This is the very first Jesus Global Youth Day. It's in the Philippines. You guys have a chance to set the precedent for all around the world. Whatever happens here, it's going to ring around the world with the church. You believe in the Philippines? Blah, 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 blah. So when Jesus Global Youth Day comes to their nation, they at least have a big challenge to step into, right? But besides all that, think of the impact of your nation. So imagine the churches now that are all over the country, in every village, every city. They're like, we're doing okay with you, whatever. Imagine they have 15 youth in their youth group, but on the day of Jesus Global Youth Day, those 3 days, they have 100. Because it's not just for the youth group, it's for all the youth of the city, right? Can you imagine? Can you just dream with me? Can you dream with me a little bit? Imagine that happening in each village, there's 10 churches, 9 out of 10 churches are doing that. They're all full of youth on those 3 days. How great is that? Imagine this. Think of the paradigm shift. If you do one big event and 1 million people there, do they come forward? How do you get them forward? How do you get their name? But if they come forward in the church, the pastor knows who they are. They're able to get followed up. Are you following me here? Yeah. We've actually got free discipleship follow-up materials if you don't have it. So you can begin to train your youth in advance so that when young people get saved, they're immediately, your 14, 15, 16-year-olds are ready to follow up, are ready to start discipling. Are you following me here? Yeah. So there's been a lot of thought put into this so that the young person comes forward and he feels like God changed my life in this church, not some big event somewhere. It just happened in a lot of different places all over the country. So you can see that the whole purpose here is for Jesus Global Youth Day to be a catalytic event, event for here in the Philippines and for around the world. The world will be coming, they'll be seeing it via satellite. You can set the momentum, you can set the standard for every other event, but also hope for nations that wow, we didn't know that could be done. So we got all kinds of alliances involved. Of course, the World Evangelical Alliance, which Bishop F. leads now, is involved in 130 nations. I meet with those leaders. But we've got other groups, listen to this. Bishop F.'s not here today because he's meeting with the leader of the Orthodox Church. They call him the ecumenical patriarch. He's like the Pope. He's in Istanbul today meeting with him, talking about Jesus Global Youth Day. I met with the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. They're very excited about coming. They said, and they saw the brochure, they see, because it says Jesus, we're in. We're in, because we're all about Jesus. There's a lot of things we don't understand about Protestants and don't know if we like it, but we love Jesus. So the Russian Orthodox Church, they're sending a delegation, and one of the leaders, one of their they call them a metropolitan, it's like one of their cardinals are coming. Chinese, South America, all kinds of people are very excited about this. The idea here is teaching young people to love Christ, live committed, lead change, and so, just a couple closing thoughts I just want to encourage you and inspire you with. So, here we are in the Philippines, showing the world what it could be like. Let me tell you, some of you might be thinking, like, who are some of the guests and bands that are coming? Because we have people coming from all over the world. African worship, Indian worship, Asian worship, from the West, all of that, and speakers from around the world. But it's really less about the speakers and bands, okay? Can you understand my heart? It's about the bigger picture. You know, we get so focused on, oh, who's cool and who's this and that, wow, cool people there, but it's really not about them. It's about taking the young people in the Philippines and showing the world how it's done, right? One of the guests we do have confirmed is Nick Wojcik. Do you know who Nick is? Yes. So he's coming, so listen to this. This is going to be so awesome. I just want you to see the thoughts. So Nick has been here before, as probably you know, and he has connections with the Department of Education. So he's working on doing a live simulcast to all the schools that week beforehand, to all the schools, and then inviting them to be part of Global Youth Day in local churches all over the country. Somebody better get excited about it now, right? So they're in ongoing conversations like this. They've wanted to do that for a long time, and this seems like a perfect opportunity to synergize. I've talked to Senator Manny. He's very excited about Jesus Global Youth Day, and he's seen if he can put it in his calendar to be a part of this as well. You all know who Senator Manny is, right? I don't need to say his last name. So it's impact in the Philippines, but it's leveraged all over the world. Okay? So, one of the things we're going to do, I just want you to see the big picture, is after it's all done, during the event, we're going to invite pastors that come. By the way, if you're a pastor, you have a group of pastors, we invite you to come to the first day, the Global Congress on Pastors, for pastors, and then go back to your churches for the rest of the event. But come, we may be up to 10,000 pastors here for that. But we're going to invite the pastors to come, as well as pastors all around the world. We really think it's a faith goal, but we think it's realistic that there'll be 100,000 churches around the world on that final night, full of youth, taking the signal to broadcast, webcast. Imagine that'll be millions and millions of youth around the world in churches, just like what happens here for 3 days, only it'll just be one night for them. Okay, but we're going to invite those pastors to be a part of a global network who are committed to reaching and discipling. So we keep learning from each other. Here's a video, here's a blog, this guy's tried this guy tried that. And so between 2020 and 2030, that decade, if we get hundreds of thousands of churches doing what you're about to do next year, we can see the trend change to 2050. Are you following me? Yeah. So if we take that decade and really focus, we can change the trajectory. How many have some faith with me in this house? It all starts right here in the Philippines, okay? So, that decade of growth is in churches all around the world. So, we're going to launch a one-year evangelism blitz all around the world for youth, every church that participates. And the next year, 2020, we'll have 20 mass events, 20 different places around the world to celebrate what the Lord has done. You can see the calendar here. So, what can you do? We have, as I mentioned, in 45 different countries, groups already planning to come and build momentum there. I just want to ask you to consider this second one. Of course, we want your pastors to come to the Congress. But how many churches in your movement, or your city, or your denomination could be part of this? Could you think about it right now? I mean, we're all in a room here, and I was looking around the room like, we're just all a bunch of normal people. I mean, some of you might be famous. I'm not famous. We're just God uses just normal people, right? Imagine just us, a bunch of normal people. Something gets sparked inside us today, right now, and it ends up affecting 1 million youth right here in the Philippines. And that's just the beginning of the ripple effect, of the exponential effect. This is what's happening in many countries. They've started a steering committee. They set a goal on how many they want to send to Manila. They set a goal on how many churches they want to receive the simulcast. And they appoint a national coordinator. So if you were just to dream with me for just a minute, just imagine 10,000 churches filled with 1 million youth all over the Philippines. How many can dream that big? Yeah. You got a lot more than 10,000 in your country. We could take 10,000, can't we? Come on. Could you just dream with me a little bit? The way that we've done it is like, if somebody's in Manila, they got to pay a ticket fee to get into the event. But for the churches, they just want people, the whole church, have as many people as you want for all 3 days, right? So it's just to cover all the costs that it takes to make it happen. And it's small compared to the impact. The message that it sends to the global church. This is how it's done. This is how we reach a generation. This is how we start something. I know you have a very young nation, and you've got some bright spots of people that are reaching it, but we need to turn the whole church on to reach the next generation. So, in each generation, there seems to be a moment that's like a seminal moment. You see it throughout Scripture where, Esther had her seminal moment. She realized, whoa, something historic is happening here. This is my moment to step up. David had his. David and Goliath. Who does he think he is? Doesn't he know who we are? Moses had his moment. He could have lived with Pharaoh and chilled out, but he's like, nah, I got to do something. The burning bush, got to do something. Any great thing that's ever happened, there's been a moment where not everybody gets to know, at least not everybody gets to understand the moment in history that they live in and that they get to be a part of. What we've talked about here today, this is the moment that we're living in. This in the movement of Jesus Christ in the church around the world, this is the moment we live in. Could this be our seminal moment? All the leaders represented here, all the years of seminary and training and ministry represented in this room, could it all be in preparation so that we could get the church in the Philippines focused on the young generation, so that we can get the church around the world focused on the next generation? The legacy that we leave is not just what happens in the Philippines, but do we leave a world that's dominated by Islam? Or do we leave a world that looked like it was going that way, but all of a sudden the Church of Christ around the world surged, and we reached young, we grew our churches young, and all of a sudden we see kind of out of nowhere this church begin to rise, and this church, and this nation, and then that nation, and all kinds of bright spots around the world, and no one understands how it happened. Well, it happened because people in a room like this said, you know what? We're going to do something about it.
Amen. Amen.
Imagine the day you're running with your baton. You're running your race. Scripture says a lot about running the race with endurance. You're running, you're preaching, you're planting churches, you're running, you're preaching, you're out of breath, and one day you die. And you go to heaven, and you meet Jesus face to face. You say, Lord, I love you. And you say, I love you. And you say, here, Lord, here's the baton. And he says, why did you bring the baton here for?
Wow.
See, we're all running a race, but many have forgotten it's a relay race. We gotta pass the baton.
Amen.
Because you run as fast as you can, but if you don't pass the baton, we still lose. So this is our moment.
Yes.
This is our time to stand. This is our time to do something.